There's a strange thing that can happen with watches, or more accurately, there's a strange thing that can happen with the human brain. Sometimes there's a revelation that occurs only after a watch is on your wrist. You see a watch in a display case or on someone else's wrist, or especially in a photo, and you think, it's fine, I guess. But then something happens when you put it on your own wrist. Sometimes the watch becomes even less interesting once you have it on. But sometimes you get that watch on your wrist and, oh damn, this is good. And that's followed by a calculation to see if you need to eat that month or whether the intoxication of owning a new watch will be enough sustenance. With this Zenith Defy Skyline, my feelings totally changed when I put it on. I don't know why I felt fine when I first saw the photos, and even when I had it in my hand. I don't know why it went from fine to fine once I put it on my wrist. My 7-inch wrist. Never forget. The Defy Skyline was added to the collection of Defy watches earlier this year and seems to be a replacement of the Defy Classic in titanium. And with this new watch comes a new movement, a slightly updated design, and a different material. Good old stainless steel. The case is 41mm across, 46mm long, and 12mm thick. It has 100 meters of water resistance with a screw-down crown and weighs 160 grams on the full bracelet. And on this steel bracelet, the Defy Skyline costs $8,400. It can be had with either a blue, black, or silver dial, though I'd like to see green or red or ice blue added to the options. I think these would be cool variants at some point. Because of the integrated bracelet and the shape of the case, this watch looks and wears just a little larger than most round watches at 41mm. It simply has more surface area than something like a 41mm Rolex Submariner. And the bracelet flares out a bit more, and it's also about the same weight as a Rolex Submariner. And that was a surprise to me. Even though I knew this was steel, in my mind a Zenith Defy was titanium or carbon or something fancy. But this watch has some heft, and I wouldn't have wished the other Defy watches to be heavier, but now that I can feel this on my wrist, I much prefer the weight of this. I don't know, maybe if you're going to spend thousands of dollars on something you don't need, there's some logic to always being able to feel its mass, like a singularity that only attracts money. This is a pretty perfect size and design on my 18cm wrist, and I don't think this would work on much smaller wrists. Maybe 6.5 inches would be the smallest. If you've ever tried on a Tissot PRX, which you can do in just about every city, I'd say this wears just a little larger, so you can use that as an accessible gauge. The design of the Skyline does a few new things. Well, the first thing is really an old thing, and that's the bezel shape. The Defy Classic had a round bezel, but with the Defy Extreme a couple years ago, Zenith started bringing back the faceted bezel. It's something that Zenith did originally on the Defy watches back in 1969. But the 1969 watch had 14 sides, and this modern watch has 12 sides, a tetradecagon versus a dodecagon. Do being a derivation of the Greek word for 2, deca meaning 10, and gon being what will happen to your $8,400 if you like this watch. So yeah, years before the Royal Oak debuted in 1972 with an 8-sided bezel, Zenith had the Defy with 6 more sides on the bezel, clearly making the Zenith watch 6 more better. On the modern Defy Skyline, the bezel has vertically brushed face and polished facets and sides down to the main case, which has some really interesting angles, especially along the top sides. And the sides of the main case look great too, with no curves and what looks like no right angles either. The ends of the lugs flow directly into the integrated bracelet, which has brushed faces and polished bevels on the sides of the links and on the edges of the center links. The bracelet has a really nice taper from about 25.5mm at the case to 17mm at the butterfly deployant clasp. But if you don't like the bracelet, Zenith has made it very easy for you to remove it with buttons on the underside of the case. Zenith makes a rubber strap to fit the Skyline, but again, if you don't like the bracelet, I'm not sure why you'd buy the watch. I can understand wanting to wear it on rubber sometimes, but with a watch like this, the design of the bracelet is nearly as important to the design of the watch as the head of the watch is. It's a holistic design, whole being a derivation of the Greek... never mind. But there are some issues with the bracelet. It doesn't have any sort of adjustment system, and it doesn't have anything like half links to make it easier to get the right size, and that's needed on a watch of this weight. Also, the screws are of this type where you need to unscrew them from both sides at the same time. That means you probably need to take this to a professional to add or remove links, and that's dumb, and dumb is bad. Under the crystal are some interesting things. First, let's talk about the dial. It has a kind of 4-pointed star pattern. It's okay, it's good. I like it better than the dial of the Defy Classic. I always felt like that dial needed some texture, and this new dial is not all that exciting to me, but I consider it an improvement over the Classic. But something I'm still unsure about is the seconds hand at 9 o'clock. You've already noticed that it looks like the seconds hand had unlimited access to the free Nespresso at the boutique. This hand makes a full rotation once every 10 seconds as opposed to once every 60 seconds. Functionally, this watch might as well not have a seconds hand at all. You really can't use this for much. You can't time anything longer than 10 seconds, and you can't even tell when a full minute has elapsed. But aesthetically, it's kinda cool, and a watch review just said aesthetically, so everyone take a drink. I expected the seconds hand to be a little distracting, but it's not. I really don't notice it much when I'm wearing the watch. And it's nice to have a little life on the dial. The seconds hand register is nicely done with different depth and a very fine concentric guilloche, which is barely visible to the naked eye. And of course, the speed of the seconds hand is only possible because of the 5 Hz El Primero movement powering this watch. And that's why this seconds hand exists, to show off. And isn't that why mechanical watches exist at all, to impress? Maybe it's just to impress yourself, that's fine, but that is what they're for, and I'm okay with that. The El Primero 3620 has 60 hours of power reserve and beats 10 times per second. It's finished industrially, which I think looks good in the style of the Skyline. At the moment, this movement is only used in the Skyline watches. The movement behaves like you'd expect with hacking, hand winding, and a quick set date. And one thing I want to thank Zenith for is the crown. It's large and 5-sided, and it's super easy to use. The feel of a crown is something that seems like often gets overlooked, but it's important, and this is a good one. And overall, the watch is a good one. I didn't even talk about Zenith itself, but if you know anything about watches, you know Zenith is the real deal, and I'm not going to go into that now. So between the brand, the design, and the mechanics of the Zenith Defy Skyline, you know, at this point in the video, if you're into this watch, I'd say go and try one on and bring your credit card. And if you're not into it, hey, at least you learned some Greek derivations along the way.